Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive in. Today, we're going beyond the typical autism conversation.
Mm.
Um, we're really going to try to understand the unique experiences of women with autism.
It's such an important topic
Yeah.
because, we hear about autism in general, but what's really fascinating is how societal expectations and like our traditional understanding of autism, it often overshadows the unique experiences of women on the spectrum.
Right.
And so diving into their stories can really challenge some assumptions.
Like, you think you have a grasp on something,
Yeah.
and then you start, peeling back the layers.
So exactly.
And you're like, oh, there's a whole other experience here that I wasn't even aware of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing that I really wanted to make sure we dug into today was this idea of masking.
Yeah.
Because I have to admit, like, before we really started looking at this,
Yeah.
that was not a term I was super familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's one of those things that, like, I feel like it could be easily misinterpreted,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It sounds like they're pretending.
Yeah. Like, oh, are you being fake?
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's so much more than that.
It's so much deeper than that. It's like, imagine having to wear this invisible costume every day to just like function right,
Yeah.
to fit in. And that's kind of what masking can feel like for women with autism is they're picking up on all these social cues that maybe other people don't even notice.
Right.
And they're constantly adjusting their behavior to try to, appear neurotypical.
And so it's like, it's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
It's way more than just
Yeah.
putting on a brave face for an afternoon. It's you're constantly kind of, I don't know. It's like you're performing, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
You're performing this role, this version of yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And, one of the women in the article, she actually said, I learned to mimic social behaviors, but it's exhausting. It took me years to realize that what I was feeling wasn't just anxiety, it was autism.
Wow.
And that really highlights that internal struggle.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key point because it's not always anxiety. It's not always something else.
Yeah.
It can be this very real thing.
And it's so often misinterpreted, right?
Yeah.
Because women are so good at adapting, their struggles might be misinterpreted as anxiety or personality quirks or other conditions for years.
And you can see how that would happen.
Oh, absolutely.
Because like if you're good at fitting in at navigating these social situations, even if it's incredibly draining.
Yeah.
Even if like you go home at the end of the day and you're like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I need a week to recover from that."
Totally.
The people around you might not realize the effort it takes.
Right. And we know, right, how much pressure there is on women in particular
Oh yeah.
to be socially adept, to smooth over all the relationships.
To make it look effortless. It's
Exactly.
like everything's fine.
Yes,
We're all good here, no problem.
And so it's just compounding those challenges.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to navigate these already complex
Yeah.
social dynamics while you feel like you're constantly performing.
Yeah.
One woman said, I feel like I'm always performing in social situations. Sometimes I just wish I could be myself without worrying about what others expect of me.
Oh man, I felt that. Like
Yeah.
that's such a human
Yes.
desire, to just be able to be yourself
And to not have to worry.
and
Yeah.
not have to think about it.
Okay.
And so to constantly be in that space, to constantly be having to think about that,
Yeah.
it's no wonder that it impacts mental health.
Well, and the article really does highlight that women with autism often face a higher risk of anxiety and depression. And when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
The constant masking, the pressure to fit in, maybe not even having a diagnosis to explain why you experience the world a little differently, it takes a toll.
It's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot to carry.
It is.
And I think, this really shines a light on this invisible struggle
Yes.
that so many women are dealing with. And it's not just the social situations, right? Like you've got the sensory input. That's another
That's a whole other layer.
whole other layer.
Yeah.
And that, I feel like, is something that, again, people don't always connect
Right.
to autism, especially when we're talking about women.
And it's one of those things where, those expectations
Yeah.
and reality just clash because think about how much sensory input women are often expected to just manage, right?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Like clothing, makeup, social events, childcare, even just the environment of a typical office, it's a lot. Yeah.
And so while sensory sensitivities are definitely a part of autism, women might end up just pushing through that sensory overload more
Yeah.
because it's expected.
Because you just do, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's like that's just what you do.
You just power through.
You power through. You're a strong woman. You got
Oh,
this.
exactly.
And it's like, whoa, yeah, but sometimes it's too much, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here thinking about all the times like I've been in like a restaurant and it's really loud and I'm like kind of feeling a little overwhelmed or like a
Yeah.
scratchy sweater, all these things that I'm like, oh, this is a lot.
Mm.
And I can only imagine how much more intense
Right.
that must be for somebody with those sensitivities.
Absolutely. And
Right.
and they do, they talk about it in the article, like me, it is exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
When women said, I can't go to parties or crowded places without feeling completely drained.
Mhm.
It's like my senses are on high alert and I just can't escape. Yeah, it's a lot to handle. And then when you add on top of that all of the societal expectations, the
Right. Yeah.
the things that you're supposed to be doing, the way you're supposed to be, it's overwhelming.
Yeah. It's a lot to process.
Yeah. Before we move on, I do want to touch on something else that really stood out to me in what we were reading and getting ready for this.
Yeah.
The article talked about the specific challenges that women with autism can face when it comes to being a parent.
Yeah. And that is such a huge
Yeah,
it's a weighty topic
it is.
because motherhood comes with so much pressure from society in general.
Oh, yeah. Be nurturing, patient, always on.
Always on, meeting every need.
Yes, all the needs, all the time.
Right. And then you layer on top of that navigating your own sensory sensitivities, potential social anxieties.
Yeah.
Maybe even the fact that you're undiagnosed. It creates a very, very challenging situation.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot to unpack. And I think, one of the quotes that really resonated with me from one of the mothers in the article was, she said, "I love my kids, but some days I feel like I'm barely keeping it together. It's hard to be a mom and manage my own autism at the same time."
Wow.
And I think it's that idea of managing both.
Yeah, it's like this dual, yeah.
It's not just one thing, it's both.
Yeah.
And often I think there's this added weight of guilt,
Oh, absolutely.
like as a parent.
Yeah.
Because, we're already kind of conditioned to feel guilty about everything
Yes.
all the
Yeah.
time.
Yes. The mom guilt is real.
It is real. It is so real.
It is so real.
And then to add on to that, this feeling of like, well, am I doing it right? Am I meeting these expectations?
And am I living up to? Oh, yeah. Am I living up to what a quote good mom
Yeah,
is supposed to be?
Yeah. And I can only imagine how much that must weigh on someone who's also navigating their own
Yeah.
neurodiversity.
It's a lot to carry.
It is. It's a lot to carry. And it makes you think like, okay, so we're talking about all this pressure, all these challenges.
Yeah.
Are there support systems in place?
Yeah.
Are there like resources specifically for neurodivergent mothers?
That's such a good point.
Because it feels like such a
Well,
specific experience.
Yeah.
And you'd hate to think of those moms just like alone in that.
100%. And that's a really critical piece of the puzzle. Like the need for support groups,
Yeah.
online communities, resources that are designed with these very specific challenges in mind. It's huge
Yeah.
because those platforms, they can become such a lifeline, right?
Yeah.
A place for women to connect with each other, to share their experiences, realize they're not alone in this.
Exactly. And it's fostering that understanding, not just in like society as a whole, but in those really specific communities as well.
Right.
And speaking of, kind of navigating different environments,
Yeah.
the workplace is another one that the article dug into.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The workplace can be tough for anyone.
Oh, yeah.
But for people with autism and especially for women, it can present this whole other set of hurdles.
What are some of the things that make it especially difficult?
Well, I mean, think about, all the unwritten rules of an office environment.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The politics, the social cues, the networking. There's this need to like read between the lines constantly.
Right. Time, yeah.
Right. And then And then you add to that the fact that women are already battling against these implicit biases
Yes.
and expectations.
Right.
And it can just feel like you're fighting an uphill battle every day.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, as the article pointed out, like that can really impact their careers too.
100%, yeah. And we see this showing up, I think, in a couple of ways, right? On the one hand, you have incredibly talented women who are underemployed,
Yeah.
stuck in positions that aren't really utilizing their skills because they're not given the opportunity or the support to really thrive.
Right.
And then on the other hand, there's this risk of burnout because that constant effort to mask, to conform,
Yeah.
it takes a toll.
It's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, people don't always think about. One of the women in the article said, in the workplace, I often feel invisible. It's frustrating when my abilities are overlooked because of my autism.
Wow.
And it's heartbreaking, but I can also see why someone would hesitate to disclose that
Yeah.
in a professional setting, given the potential for bias.
And there's no easy answer, right? Because on the one hand, being open about it can help employers understand your needs.
Right.
Understand your communication style, maybe make some accommodations.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's always that risk of prejudice,
Yeah.
discrimination, even losing your job. So
Right. Of course.
it's this balancing act.
Yeah.
And it's not something anyone should have to face alone.
No, absolutely not. It makes you wonder about the legal protections in place too. Like,
Yes.
are there laws
Right.
to prevent that discrimination based on neurodiversity?
Yeah.
And are they actually being enforced?
Right.
Like, it feels like that's a conversation
It is.
that we need to be having more openly.
It's a conversation we absolutely need to have. And it ties into this larger need for awareness
Yeah.
and understanding and recognizing that for many women with autism, the workplace is its own unique set of challenges, and it's not just about adapting to a job.
Yeah.
It's about feeling seen and valued
Yes.
for who they are.
And that seems to be like a common thread here, is just this search for community,
Yes.
for understanding.
Huge. And the article really touches on that powerfully. Imagine, right, going through life feeling like you have to mask who you are,
Yeah.
only to discover that there are all these other people out there who get it,
Yeah.
who've been through similar struggles, who accept you for you.
Yeah.
It's life-changing.
It's huge.
It's huge.
To finally feel seen and heard, I would imagine,
Yes.
without judgment, without having to,
Without the costume.
without the costume. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's got to be an amazing feeling.
And empowering, too, because once you find that sense of belonging,
Yeah.
it can really give you the strength to embrace your neurodiversity,
Yeah.
advocate for yourself, build a life that really fits.
Yes.
Okay.
100%. Another quote that really stuck with me was one of the women said, "I crave connection with other women like me. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in my struggles."
Yeah.
It makes it so clear how vital those support systems are.
Absolutely. And the good news is they're out there.
They are?
Online communities, support groups, becoming real lifelines for women with autism,
Yeah.
offering that validation and understanding that they might not be finding in their offline lives.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible to see how powerful that can be.
It really does feel like those online
Yeah.
spaces in particular are really they're filling a very, very specific need.
They are.
And it's not just for support either. It's for information sharing.
Yeah.
It's for advocacy.
Advocacy.
It's for even like activism.
100%.
Like it's not
It's
just
not just let me vent about my day.
right. Exactly.
Right. It's let's come together
Yeah.
and create change.
Yes.
And these women are using their voices, they're sharing their experiences, they're challenging stereotypes, and they're pushing for greater inclusion
Yes.
and acceptance of autism in every aspect of society.
And that's what I love about this whole conversation is it's not just about identifying the challenges, but it's also about celebrating the strengths
Yes.
and the resilience
Yes.
of these women.
And acknowledging that neurodiversity is not a deficit.
Right. Yeah.
It's about embracing these different ways
Yeah.
of thinking, of being, of experiencing the world.
And when we create those spaces where those differences are celebrated, I feel like everybody benefits.
We all benefit.
It's
Yeah.
amazing to me like how much depth there is to this. And I feel like you said, we've we've just kind of scratched the surface, but in a way that makes me feel like, okay, we really need to keep having this conversation.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a conversation that needs to happen on multiple levels, right?
Right.
We've talked about like societal expectations and support systems and the workplace, but it comes down to the individual experience too,
Yeah.
you know?
What do you mean?
Well, like if someone's listening to this and they're resonating with these experiences,
Yeah.
maybe they're even feeling a little overwhelmed by it all.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that they're not alone.
Yeah.
You know? Like it's easy to feel like you're the only one
Right.
going through something, especially when it's something as personal as this.
Especially if you've spent years masking.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe you haven't even been diagnosed.
Right.
So you might not even realize that there are other people out there who get it.
Exactly. And that's why, finding those communities,
Yeah.
those support systems, whether it's online or in person,
Right.
it can be so validating,
Yes.
so empowering to connect with people who understand.
To finally feel seen,
Yes.
to feel heard, to feel accepted for who you are without judgment.
It's huge.
It's got to be like life-changing.
It is. It really is. And it's not even just about, finding support. It's about finding your voice.
Yes.
We talked about this a little bit before when we were talking about online communities.
Yeah.
But one thing that's been so inspiring to see is how women with autism are using their experiences
Yeah.
to advocate for themselves and for others.
Yeah, they're taking back the narrative.
Yes.
And in doing so, they're helping to create a world that is more inclusive and more understanding for everyone.
Exactly. And they're doing it with such strength
Yeah.
and resilience. We've talked about the challenges.
Right.
But let's not forget that women with autism are also incredibly strong,
Yes.
resourceful, and capable.
They are.
They're navigating a world that wasn't always designed for them, but they are finding ways to thrive.
Yes. And that's what sticks with me after all of this is that sense of hope.
Yes.
Like the challenges are real,
Yeah.
but so is the strength,
Oh, absolutely.
and the power of finding your community, finding your voice,
Yes.
and ultimately finding yourself.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This has been such an enlightening conversation, and I hope that, anyone who's listening who feels, encouraged to learn more,
Yeah.
to connect with others, to just really embrace the incredible diversity
Yes.
of human experience.
Love that.
Yeah.
That feels like the perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. It's been a privilege to learn from you.
The feeling is mutual.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Yes, absolutely.